College football nerds here doing our favorite video of every week, other than our live show that you should watch at 10 p.m. Eastern after you like and subscribe here. It's our top 10, and you are going to try your hand at a top 10 in the comments and realize that all y'all who wanted 2007, you got 2007, because after the first couple, it is bonkers, y'all. And we're going to try our best to put together a top 10 that has some sort of cohesive thought to it. And I'm going to tell you right now, it's a little sketchy. So we're going to get the boring ones out of the way, Josh. Alabama, Georgia, Oregon, 1, 2, 3 for me. All of these teams have good wins under their belt and haven't lost to anybody. Oregon, a lot of people were a little concerned about the Fresno game. Fresno's a good team. I think beating Florida in the swamp is a bigger deal right now than beating Ohio State on the road. That's just where I'm at in terms of that. So give me your top three.
The same three in the same order: Alabama, Georgia, and Oregon. And there's not a lot more to say at this point. I mean, Alabama has the best win of anybody in college football, I think, because even in the AP poll, Florida's ahead of Ohio State. And yeah, Georgia looks really good. The only other team that looks all around great, and Oregon is playing as well as they are without having been 100% and has no warts to show. So it's those three.
And for me, number 4 is Florida. We got a lot of heat last week for putting Florida at 6 after the loss to Alabama. And what everybody said was you don't reward a loss by moving somebody up. But that is silly to me, because Clemson already had a loss, and people were clearly putting Clemson ahead of Florida. A lot of teams already had a loss, so what you're saying is you reward a loss as long as somebody was ranked really high in July and lost a couple of weeks before someone who wasn't ranked as high in July. So you're still putting more weight on preseason polls and sequence of loss, which is silly, over what you've seen on the field. And what I've seen on the field now is a Florida team that not only, I said this in the live show, these close games against really good teams have the tendency to either fuel you or break you. And it looks like they fueled Florida, because Florida came out and handled business, and all the Florida fans that wanted Emory Jones benched back when Florida was sandbagging that offense now see why he was the starter. And the starter is usually the starter for a reason coming out of fall camp. Josh, who you got at number 4?
I also have Florida number 4. Yeah, it's kind of funny. The team I hated on because I said Emory Jones was the starter and I didn't think Richardson was going to be a huge factor. It's because Jones is good at doing what he does. And they're going to get Richardson back and add packages for him. And right now they look like a complete team. They're a good defensive team. They're a good offensive team. They have good line play, which most teams don't. A lot of teams in college football don't have right now. And they're actually getting really good quarterback play. And I'll agree with you. It made me actually angry that Florida and Clemson had the same record, and yet Clemson was staying ranked ahead of Florida when every on-field result we had in front of us, the quality of play had Florida was the better team, and by every metric. And I think we're finally this week the AP poll is coming around to that fact. But Florida, for me, is a solid number 4. Everything past this, though, yep, hold on to your britches, because it gets pretty wild pretty fast.
Yeah, and I want to contextualize what we're about to do here, because people are going to say this is crazy. All these other teams have good wins, and Florida has a loss. And I want to be fair and just contextualize this and say, okay, but if you swap schedules, and you say this all the time, if you swap schedules, so if you gave Iowa's schedule to Florida, does Florida struggle for 3 quarters and have an ugly win against Colorado State or not? And then if you give Iowa Florida's schedule, does Florida have a win over Alabama or not? So you have to, it's only fair to do that, because otherwise you're saying, okay, I'm going to rank you higher because you haven't played the number 1 team in the country. That's just luck. The scheduling fell that way, or bad luck that Florida had to play Alabama. That's not fair. And so I'm dinging Iowa, not only for what we've seen in other games where they've really struggled offensively, I'm dinging them now for actually struggling against a team that's not good. They still get credit, and that's why they're still in the top 5. They get credit for the wins they had, even though it's looking like Indiana's just not a good football team, but they drilled Indiana, so they get credit for that. Give me your number 5.
My number 5 departs from you pretty quickly here. And for me, my number 5 is actually Ohio State. I don't think Ohio State is a phenomenal football team right now. I think they're deeply flawed. I think their defense has issues. I think their offense has a lot of inconsistencies. I don't know of another team behind them that I think would reliably be better than them. I don't know of any team behind them that I would regularly pick to beat Oregon. And, I would say they're by default, but that's really not the right way to put it. I mean, the talent level is higher. The overall quality is higher. But the mush is such that Ohio State is not going to clearly look better. And I don't really fully expect that they'll necessarily have a better record of everyone behind them. But I think if you traded schedules with Ohio State with most anyone else in the country, they're pretty likely to have about the same record. And that's why I have Ohio State 5th.
Yeah, the only thing I will say, and Ohio State's in my top 10 too, Ohio State fans don't need to get too overreactive, excited about what they saw against Akron, because we talked about that with the Auburn fans who are really excited about what Auburn did offensively against Akron, and to say that Akron is UConn is the worst, Akron's the next worst team in D1 football, FBS football. They're so bad that there's nothing to learn. The only potential thing to learn in that game would be if Ohio State struggled, and then alarm bells will be ringing, but they didn't. They handled their business. Number 6 for me is Ole Miss, and I asked the question on Twitter, would you rather be good on both sides of the ball but not great, or elite on one side of the ball and not good on the other? That's Ole Miss. They might be 2018 Oklahoma. We don't know yet. But right now we do know that's an elite offensive unit, and that's why, Penn State fans, this is where they're going to say, we're number 4 in the AP poll. Give us our love because we've got 2 ranked wins already. I think Ole Miss would probably be about a 6-point favorite over Penn State. That's why I've got them right there at number 6. Give me yours.
My number 6 for right now is Arkansas. And look, Arkansas is not flashy, but I think they're better in a lot of ways than people give them credit for. They've got good quarterback play, better than I was expecting. The defense is very good. I say this over and over again. I mean, you return the leading tackler of the NCAA at linebacker. That's a big deal. There's a lot of seniority across the board. You continue to rib me for saying that Burks is not a top-end elite SEC receiver, which doesn't mean that he's not a draft pick. I had poor wording there, but I'm just not sold that he's a first-rounder. People can keep arguing with me over that one. But they do have real skill talent. I mean, they've got real, Traylons, running back and wide receiver, high-level players. And I think they're maybe the most complete team on the field right now. And personally, I think they would beat Ole Miss more often than not, which is why.
For number, let's see, where are we at 7? So for number 7, I've got Penn State. This is really, I said it last week, and Penn State fans are not happy with us right now because we're not that high on their team. What I've said is, yes, you get credit for ranked wins, but what we also need to do in these ranked wins is take away information to know that you're 6 points better than Wisconsin and you're a goal line stand better for an 8-point win over Auburn, both of which are pretty bad, very flawed teams, but you're about as good as them, basically. And so that concerns me. Even in a win, if you play a team that's not great, close, that concerns me. Maybe not if I think you're a good team, but if I'm going to put you in the top 10, you're going to be scrutinized at a different level. Do I think that Ole Miss probably drills Auburn right now? Yeah. Do I think that a lot of teams would beat Wisconsin, and that's why I don't have Notre Dame in my top 10? Yeah. Notre Dame drilled them Saturday, but it was really more of a 17-10 kind of game that went a little sideways in the fourth quarter. Penn State still gets credit for these wins, but I'm not sure I'm picking them over Ohio State right now. Give me your number 7.
My number 7 is Ole Miss, and it's what you just said. I mean, I think if Ole Miss played Auburn right now, they would probably drill them. I think if Ole Miss played Wisconsin right now, they would probably drill them. And it's not. Look, a lot of people are going to look at these lists and say we're absolute SEC homers. I swear that's not the case. When you watch Wisconsin, there is really bad quarterback play, and it's very apparent. And Penn State beat Auburn. The thing is, Auburn is an SEC team. I just think they're probably a lower half SEC team, and you're just about as good as Auburn, who, again, I think Ole Miss would kill. I'll tell you right now, since we're on that point, I don't actually have Penn State in my top 10 right now. And that's because with the information I have right now about Wisconsin and Auburn and where Penn State looked relative to those two teams, personally, I think Penn State is likely to lose 3 to 4 more games this season. And in fact, I'm not sure that Iowa, Ohio State, Michigan, and Michigan State might be better than Penn State. But I don't think they're going to do better than 2 losses against that group. And that's not enough to be any higher on this ranking right now. Ole Miss, which I didn't talk about, yeah, same point. I mean, elite on the offensive side of the ball, and I think probably average, like we talked about in our preview, on the defensive side of the ball, but that's enough to be ranked where they are.
And people are going to really be frustrated with that. But what AP voters do is really safe. And they say, here's my list, here's my preseason ranking in July, and every week I take an incremental amount of data and try to use that data to justify what I started out with in July. Instead of saying, let's look at all of the data. So even though you beat Auburn last week, we got another set of data this week that says, yeah, you can have a letdown game, but Auburn had a letdown game against Georgia State in that they benched their quarterback, their 3-year starting quarterback, because he was so bad, needed a 4th and 9 Johnny Manziel-like Hail Mary basically to beat Georgia State. That's really bad information, and it matters because those are the types of teams, if you're a legitimate top 5, you need to be able to create separation from, because Auburn's not a good team. So Penn State fans aren't going to love it, but I hope that if what we say might happen, a 9-3, 8-4 type season from here on out, that they appreciate that we could be a lot easier on ourselves with this and just say what people expect to hear instead of sticking our neck out and putting these top 10s on the way we see them, the way we process information. If we're wrong, we'll own it. But if we're right, I hope that all y'all that kill us are coming back to say, yeah, you were right. The next one for me, number 8, is Ohio State. I've got some concerns for them defensively and at quarterback. Akron game gives me no new information to say that they're great, but this is more about the other teams in the top 10 that we had that actually gave us more information that they're actually pretty bad. So I think we had Clemson floating around somewhere around this spot based on the fact that they had an elite unit on one side of the ball. But the Georgia Tech game scared us, and obviously the NC State game showed us what we were thinking. So they dropped out for me. Give me your number 8.
My number 8 is Iowa. And the reason they fell is because of the quality of teams they've played and how they've performed in those games and the information I have on them. And look, it's a fair criticism to say we beat X team, but now that we beat them, you're saying they're bad, right? Like we beat Auburn, and now because we beat Auburn, you're saying they're bad. That's not actually what we're doing. We're saying you beat Auburn that we really didn't have trust in, and then they turned around and almost lost the next game. You beat Wisconsin, they turned around and almost lost the next game. And I have the same problem with Iowa. They beat a ranked Indiana and destroyed them. Well, Indiana, it turns out, is probably really not a good team. They beat Iowa State soundly. Iowa State, probably not very good, really. I mean, they're a good team, maybe, but not a top 10 team by any measure. And then last week, Kent State 30-7, Colorado State 24-14, and now I'm starting to really question okay, a lot like Penn State, but maybe even some ways and some maybe even worse. Is it really just you're the result of us overranking your opponents, basically? Not that I'm dinging your opponents because they lost to you, but I'm dinging them because of the performance in general. And that's why Iowa falls. I mean, still a top 10 team, but that's why they fall to 8th to me. I'm losing confidence in their record. Or their resume, I should say.
Yeah, and the only counter I would give is that, Iowa State lost to Baylor, who might be a decent team. Iowa really dominated that game, even more than the score showed. Iowa dominated Indiana, and that's why I gave them a little credit. Like, if you beat teams that were highly ranked that turn out not to be great, but you owned them, then that kind of takes away some of the hit that you're going to get when they get bad down the stretch. The difference is Penn State is the opposite of that. Like, those were close games against what we think are pretty, at best, very flawed teams, in all reality, pretty bad teams. So that's and Penn State fans are never coming back at this point. But okay, number 9, I have Arkansas. I think that they're the good, not great on either side of the ball team, right? Like, Iowa's elite on one side of the ball defensively, they're bad on the other. Arkansas is good, not great offensively, good, not great defensively, and I think that's going to play out against Georgia this weekend. Still good enough to be in the top 10, I think, and some of that is credit for their wins. I think Texas is better than people think. People wrote them off after the Arkansas game, but that's to Arkansas's credit because they made them look so bad. So I like that about them. I don't love what I saw against A&M, knowing how inept that A&M offense was, that they couldn't fully capitalize and put that game away. But I still got them at number 9. Give me yours.
My number 9, and I just changed it. This is how unsure we are, but I was thinking something through. It's going to be Penn State because for the reality of where they're at with the teams they played, they did win those games. We call them, we're talking about being bad teams, but I think they're maybe 25th to 40th, like Auburn, in nationally, which is sort of lower half of P5. But that's still probably enough to be 9th. I mean, the amount of really, really good teams isn't very high. And I'll tell you, originally I had Oklahoma in that slot. And I started to think about it and said, you know what? How can I justify that? I mean, Oklahoma beats Nebraska by 7. They beat Tulane by 5. They beat West Virginia by 3. This isn't an aberration, and it's not even a trend. It's just who they are at this point. Penn State is a lot better defensively than Oklahoma. I don't know how much better offensively Oklahoma really is than Penn State, but I do know Penn State probably plays better competition. So that's why I end up moving Penn State up to 9 in my rankings. I say up to 9. It's down from 4 from the AP. So lots of people are going to love that. It's up
from 4 minutes ago. For me, I've got Cincinnati at number 10, and this is another no confidence pick. I just think that they get credit for the wins they have in a really wild year. They didn't drop that game against Indiana. I do worry that they're in the top 10 a little bit because of preseason and what I said was an overhyped team last year. But Michigan had a one-score game against Rutgers, and that's who I got at number 11 if I had a number 11. Michigan had a one-score game. I don't love what I see from Oklahoma right now. I've got some concerns there. Honestly, I might think about Fresno closer to top 10, but for now, then we'll see Saturday. I've got Cincinnati at number 7. I am going to hold firm on Notre Dame not being in my top 10 because you're trailing Wisconsin in the fourth quarter and you have some fluky scores, 2 pick-sixes and a kick return. That doesn't calm my concerns about this offense or this team in general. I think Notre Dame is good, not great. I don't have them in my top 10. I will if they beat Cincinnati. Give me your number 10.
My number 10 is Michigan. Like you said, one-score win. Now, I don't think Rutgers is a bad team, but Michigan hasn't given up more than 2 touchdowns in a game. I think their defense is legitimately very good. The offense has been pretty darn good consistently. We'll get a big data point when they play Wisconsin to sort of compare them to Notre Dame. If they look more dominant than against Wisconsin than Notre Dame did, I think it's sort of justified. Now, I'll talk about the 2 teams that's not in here, and it's a team we're doing a preview for this week, and that's Cincinnati and Notre Dame. Because at the end of the day, I just don't know when I look back at their schedules and who they've played that these other teams would have done worse with those schedules. I don't know that they're better than those teams. I kind of look at it, if you traded schedules, would you do better with their, would Team A do better than Team B did with their schedule and vice versa? And that's sort of how I compare team quality. And I sort of use head-to-head almost as a tiebreaker. And I do think, I just don't see Cincinnati or Notre Dame on that list. But I do want to note, I think the Cincinnati Notre Dame winner has a really good shot at the playoff now, because with Clemson knocking themselves probably out of contention with their 2 losses, and the rest of the landscape of college football, it's a good chance that one of Cincinnati or Notre Dame, whoever wins this game, is going to finish 1 loss or less. I don't really love their schedule anymore. Notre Dame's schedule is not anywhere near as hard as I thought it would be going into the year. But I think they could be a team that's not even necessarily in my top 10 and very easily could make the playoff.
And with so much craziness, I don't think Oregon, they probably won't even go undefeated, right? But with so much craziness, this is the year that the G5 could slide in. And Cincinnati, the best G5, potentially, has 2 P5s, named P5s on their schedule, right? Teams that have been recently good. And I said on the live show, Notre Dame, for all intents and purposes, having no conference affiliation, is still an auto bid conference in and of themselves as it relates to one of the 4 playoff slots. And so Notre Dame goes undefeated, just like any other, conference champion goes undefeated or 12-1, they're in the playoffs. Fair or not, and I would say fair generally, because even though their schedule has fallen apart a little bit, it's not for lack of effort. They schedule as many named teams as they can. So you're right. Like, the winner of this game actually might back into the playoffs. And I say back in. This year, if you go undefeated, as wild as it's been, you deserve to be in the playoffs. Even if it's Cincinnati, I'm willing to say that they deserve to be in the playoffs given this season. Give me a parting shot, final thought on top 10 this week.
I mean, my final thought really is it's extremely hard to rank teams. It's easy for me to be critical of the AP poll and their rankings. But look, it's just hard, guys. I mean, there's not a lot of teams that are perfect. And there's the gap between number 6 and number 20 isn't big. And you could easily see number 20 beating number 6 or 7 with some decent clip. The one thing I will say, looking at the AP poll and their rankings, and the coaches poll is even worse, what is Clemson even doing in the rankings at this point? The coaches has them at 19. AP has them at 25. Do you actually think Texas, who's not ranked in either poll, would lose to Clemson right now? Because Clemson doesn't look like they're going to score on anybody, much less an actual good team with a real good defense. And frankly, along the same lines, NC State's 23rd in the AP poll and got blown out by Mississippi State. That should really put some alarm bells that we're ranking Clemson and now NC State by proxy based off our preseason projection or anticipation. I don't think it's at all justified. And, the Auburn-Penn State comparison where they were pretty close, NC State, Mississippi State, Arkansas,
Georgia
Texas. What I'm going through is, look, people may call us SEC lovers or homers or whatever. There are a lot of reasons to believe the SEC is way ahead as a conference than a lot of the other conferences right now. And NC State and Clemson, I have to throw out there, really shouldn't be ranked ahead of Mississippi State. And I'm not saying Mississippi State should be ranked high, but maybe NC State and Clemson should be ranked a lot lower than we have them.
Yeah, BC's 4-0 right now and might win the ACC, and just went to overtime with the Missouri team that nobody expects to do anything in the SEC. So that kind of puts that into perspective. All right, y'all, give us your top 10 in the comments. Let us know how crazy we are. We can take it. It's okay. We're big boys. We're used to the criticism. Thanks so much, y'all. Have a great week, and God bless.